Hey everyone, welcome to Mom Talks. It's so great to be here with you today. We're actually at Progress West Hospital, if it looks any different. I am with Dr. Halstead from our Young Athletes Center. We are starting our new series on Mom Talks talking about sports, and I'm so excited about this series. Probably a little too eager, let's be honest, like any sporting mom, because I have kids that play sports. My 6-year-old plays soccer. My 6-year-old also plays baseball, and my twin 3-year-olds are starting soccer later this month. So we are kicking off this series. I'm so excited. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
We are going to start this off with a topic that we see a lot in the news, especially among our young athletes, is concussions. How terrified should I be of a concussion?
Yeah, so, I think we have to put it in perspective. Head injuries happen, right?
Yeah.
And so having a concussion is not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that the person's going to be permanently damaged for the rest of their life, kind of thing. And there's a lot of that perception out there. We expect people to recover. Now again, there are exceptions to that, but again, so I wouldn't put it out there like, oh my gosh, there's no sports you can participate in because you can't protect yourself from life either. You can get concussions from things outside of sports, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So is there a gradient when it comes to concussions? Like, oh, this was a really mild level 1 concussion and this was a 10. Okay, 10, hard stop, we're done here.
Yeah, so there used to be a system of what we call grading scales of concussions. We would call them grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. It's been almost 20 years now since we recommended not to use those anymore. And there's lots of reasons why. They don't really help us with managing the concussion. They don't really, they were based, most of them, off of expert opinion of just saying, hey, these couple things would classify it as this or this without any science behind it. And I kind of look at it this way. I describe it to my patients, a concussion's a brain injury. And the brain gets injured regardless of whether the person has mild symptoms or severe symptoms. So and sometimes if we start calling a concussion a mild concussion, it gives someone a false sense of, oh, it wasn't so bad.
And quick recovery.
Right, but you still hurt the brain. Or you had a severe concussion, well, oh my gosh, now I'm in for a lifetime of problems.
Yeah.
So you can have severe symptoms and you can have mild symptoms, but we don't classify it. I just tell people you either had a concussion or you did not have a concussion. Without putting grades on them.
That's super helpful. And I think it's important for me to remember to tell you guys, if you have questions, please write to us, let us know. Dr. Halstead is awesome and super helpful, and I think this is a great time to ask them if you've had an experience with a concussion or you're worried about your kids getting concussions. Write us and let us know in the comments. So one thing I'd be curious to know about is, so it's an injury to the brain. What happens during a concussion? You collide, you hit the wall, you do whatever. What is it? Yeah,
so it's a good question as far as what exactly happens in the brain. We have lots of theories of what happens, and not to get into all the fancy science behind it, but there are changes that happen in the brain as far as how your brain processes energy and how it uses parts of the brain well, and some concussions can affect certain areas of the brain and others, which is oftentimes we see different symptoms. So someone may affect the system that controls what their eyes do, and so they may have a lot of visual symptoms with their concussion, or it may affect how your brain processes information. So the person has a lot of difficulties with recalling information, learning new information. So it can affect different parts there. But the one thing I think we have to remember with a concussion, it's not just from necessarily a hit to your head. You can get a hit to your body and you have a reflexive whiplash effect to your head, and that can also cause a concussion too, because so the brain moves somewhat in the skull because it is kind of in a layer of fluid inside a hard structure, and so if you get a rotational thing or if you get an injury where there's a direct impact, that can hurt the brain.
Wow. So because I guess in my head I think it's a contact thing. So, I got hit in this side of my head, maybe this is going to affect this, but it is that back and forth as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing that oftentimes we do see with concussions is a lot of neck problems associated with that, because the neck can get hurt in the same process of getting that whiplash.
Neck's not exactly strong enough to keep big old kid-sized melons up.
Yep.
That's super helpful.
Jerry Maguire 8-pound head, yep.
Right, yeah, your head's kind of heavy to be just supported by your vertebrae in your neck, so that's really helpful. So I think football, I think we all think as the primary suspect when we hear concussions. Is that true?
Yeah, so for boys, football is the most likely sport to get a concussion, and followed by ice hockey and lacrosse. So the three helmeted sports, basically. Yeah. In girls, soccer is the most likely sport to get a concussion in. So
really?
But if you think about it this way, we do have those contact sports. Ice hockey is present in girls, just
Yeah.
not as large numbers. And
Yeah.
so there's not been a lot of research in girls hockey yet as far as how frequent it is.
Right.
We're starting to see other sports that we see concussions a lot in with girls, like wrestling has now become a very prominent thing. So
Yeah.
right here across the street at Francis Howell High School, they had a great
They have a
girls
huge yeah.
wrestling team this year. So we have to worry about that as well. Still,
Okay.
now that some of the girls are being introduced into some of the boys sports, and
Yeah.
I mean, we just heard about a girl signing an intent to play football in college, and so we have to remember that some of the exclusively boys sports are
Yeah.
not all just exclusively boys
Right.
sports.
So there's kind of a balance to it. So there are some of these more aggressive sports that maybe you might see it. Would you ever tell a family that, avoid a certain sport completely because of concussions?
Oh, sure. I mean, we
Yeah.
do make recommendations. That's never an easy thing to say
Yeah.
that, hey, you shouldn't be participating in a sport. But obviously, if someone's had repetitive injuries, we don't want to keep hurting the brain over and over and over
Yeah.
again. So at some point, we have to have a discussion that maybe this particular sport may not be the best for you, but also realizing that there are other sports that person may be able to participate in. So it's not like, oh my gosh, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, there does come a point. I tell everybody there's no magic number. There's this myth out there that you've had 3 concussions and you're done.
Yeah, it's not 3 strikes, you're out.
There's no magic science behind that number. I have retired people after 1 concussion or recommended retirement, and we've had people who've had dozens of concussions that we've had to recommend retirement. So it really has to be kind of an individualized thing when we start talking about that.
Yeah. Oh, we got a question.
So what should I worry about after my child has had a concussion?
Yeah, so I think the warning signs. So when we think about concussion, the common symptoms that people have are things like headaches, dizziness. They may have troubles focusing or concentrating. They may feel like the lighter noise is bothering them. They may feel very sleepy. Those are common things that we see afterwards. One myth about a symptom or a sign of concussion is being knocked out or a loss of consciousness, and so that actually happens in less than 10%, and some people say only as little as 5% of concussions.
Wow.
So obviously, if you've had a loss of consciousness, by definition, you have had a concussion, but that's not the main feature.
That's not,
of that.
yeah.
So those are kind of the common things we see, but things that would be worrisome to us that we're thinking of something maybe more going on than a concussion would be the worst headache of that person's life, if they have repetitive episodes of throwing up, and I've always kind of used what I call the 2 puke rule.
Yeah.
So if someone's thrown up more than twice, that is time to go to an ER, because that may be a sign that something more is going on. If someone has numbness or tingling in one of their arms or legs, if they're garbling words, they are making total gibberish sense. Or if they have not been able to recognize anybody that's going around, like they just are completely oblivious to who's there, like people who would normally know.
Yeah.
Those are worrisome things, and those probably need to get evaluated in the ER.
And I think as a parent, you kind of would see those and immediately have those worrisome things that you're already heading around.
And obviously it is a scary injury,
Yeah.
and sometimes the simple things like they do have a headache, or they may feel dizzy, or they're a little unsteady. Those can be very worrisome to parents, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's bad.
Yeah.
And so those are very common things that happen with a concussion. So that's why we kind of stratify that a little bit of these are the things that really alarm us as doctors. That may not be the same as what alarm a parent.
Yeah.
So.
Will you see more than one symptom all the time, or what if they just have a headache, or is it just that they're a little woozy, or is it always you're going to see this, which is going to accompany this? That way you know the difference.
Yeah, that's a tough one with concussions, because when you say you have one isolated symptom, well, is it really a concussion?
Yeah.
Odds are, if there was a hit to the head and that produced that, could be, but there are other things that can cause that. But not every concussion results in a headache. So most do get a headache.
Yeah.
But if we start to see other things creep in, then that's an issue. And one thing we have to remember about concussions is sometimes people think there's cause effect. I have my head injury, and immediately afterwards I feel bad.
Okay.
That doesn't always happen. So sometimes people may get hit and they feel okay, or they don't feel like anything's going on. They start getting more active, or a few hours later, those symptoms start to pop in.
Not even just like a couple innings or an hour later once you get home.
Correct.
It can be into the evening or something.
Which is why we always have the phrase of when in doubt, sit them out. And so if someone's got a head injury and you're suspicious, you're even thinking about a concussion, it's better to err on the side with a kid of keeping them out and not putting them back into play for two reasons. One is their symptoms, like I mentioned, may not present right away, and that is actually harmful for
I was
them
going
to
to
be
say,
back
what
playing.
damage can happen if you're like, all right, go ahead and go back in, and they do actually have a concussion? What could happen?
Well, if they get additional hits,
Yeah.
number one, that could cause more severe injury to the brain.
Got
So
it.
that is one thing that we would get concerned about and not want to happen. But there actually has been research that shows when kids continue to participate after their concussion, compared to kids that stop immediately, the ones that keep playing, those kids actually have much worse symptoms, and it actually can sometimes double their recovery time afterwards.
Oh, wow.
So keeping them out
Yeah,
help them
it's
potentially
actually
get them feel better quicker,
potentially
and
get them
not have
back
as much
in.
problems. So again, it's one of those things that we shouldn't be cavalier with those. And the other problem that we run into a lot, and this is just an athlete mentality, is a lot of kids will say, I feel fine, because they want to please the coach, or they want to please the parent, or they don't want to come out and
I
let
just
down
want
their
to play.
teammates. Right.
I'm here, let's play.
So if you're a coach or a parent that's involved, I try and get them away from the question, are you feeling okay? Because odds are the kid's going to respond, I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Because they may get annoyed by their parent asking that question
Right.
too. And so that's where you got to dig into things a little bit more, asking them about are headaches going on or things like that. And again, erring on the side of caution.
Being a little more specific with them than just, are you okay? Because they could even, I guess, think emotionally okay after getting hit. You know, it can be a scary thing.
Right.
Big difference in conversation. So when in doubt, sit them out and avoid saying, are you okay? It's more, does your head hurt? Hey, can you see me okay?
Sure. And, again, putting in perspective, remembering it is a game.
Yeah.
Okay? And yes, games are important, but their brain health is so much more important than that.
So let's talk, what does the long term look like for a kiddo after they've had a concussion? You know, you hear about these stories where people have had concussions in their youth, and now as adults they're having periods of blackout and rage. What does that all kind of...
Yeah, so obviously that's the big concern, and that gets a lot of attention. Is potential for
among our
long-term
NFL
issues.
players, Right,
and so that gets a huge amount of attention. The problem is translating what happens to a retired NFL player or a collegiate player who has had multiple hits, both maybe that have produced concussion or not. And so that's one of the big concerns is repetitive hits to the head that may not result in a concussion. So that's where you're seeing a lot of push now to try and reduce the number of contact practices for sports that involve contact. Rule changes, so increasing the age as far as heading, increasing the age for body checking. There's been a big push for increasing the age of starting tackle football, and moving that up, all in the thought process of, when we've got a younger kid, there's probably not a big reason we need to be emphasizing contact at that younger age. And so we're seeing a lot more of a push towards flag football and, again, reducing heading. But part of that also is we created that a little bit because of the culture of sports. We pushed everything. We have to start kids so much earlier because they're not going to be ready. So we just take that sport and we make it into the little kids sport, which is really not the best thing. Because those kids aren't developed motor-wise to do what they need to do. Skill development isn't where they need it to be yet. So we have to
remember. Tiny people are clumsy.
We have to remember that.
And that's why I'm excited about 3-year-old soccer, because it's just going to be funny to watch them run. That's all. The little bumblebees.
Yes, exactly.
I guess one other thing is prevention. So we've talked about how it happens, what happens when it happens, what you're going to see when it happens. But is there anything we can do to keep our kids' brains safe? Yeah,
so that's a good question. So obviously, reducing our exposure to extra hits is always a good thing. So I think that's where we're looking at what's your team doing? What kind of things are we doing for that? But then we talk about all the protective equipment. And so that's things like helmets or headbands for soccer, as an example, or I've seen them used in lacrosse and other sports, mouth guards, things like that. Unfortunately, those are not going to be our big answer, probably, for reducing the likelihood of concussion. And I always put it like this in my office with patients, is that if you think about the 3 most common sports in boys to get a concussion are football, ice hockey, and lacrosse. Those are all helmeted sports. So if the helmet was the answer, we should not see the concussion rate being so high.
The mouth guards.
And mouth guards. Awesome to protect your teeth. Protect those in
any dentist and orthodontist watching will attest to that.
For braces, yes, we want to protect the teeth. But unfortunately, that's not going to be our answer.
It's not going to contribute to brain injury.
And same thing for the headband. So if a big hard helmet isn't going to protect you from getting a concussion, a simple little bandit ear around the head is also not going to do that. So, and I've actually had, unfortunately, some kids that I've seen in my office, soccer players as an example, who have become victims of what we describe as targeting. So kids that are wearing headbands, other opponents know why you're likely wearing a headband. You've probably had concussions before, you're worried about concussions. So we're going to go and take that kid out. And being a little bit more aggressive against that player. So again, it can maybe put that kid even at increased risk. It's doing
the exact opposite of what you wanted to do.
Yep, and you know, the gladiator mentality too. I put more protective gear on me, I'm probably safer. So I play more recklessly, which then in turn.
Yeah, it's not so much even the other kids you got to worry about. It's kind of empowering your own kid that they're not invincible to this, and that learning the proper techniques is probably the best way versus a headband or a mouth guard like that. So helpful. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. Am I missing anything?
I think it's important to take the injury seriously. I think it's, sometimes it's just a concussion. Yeah. It's an injury to the brain, and we have to remember that. And
pretty important, right? Pretty important part of the body.
Kind of controls a lot of things in our body, so we do want it to be functioning well. But also putting the emphasis is that if you've had a concussion, all hope is not lost forever. Okay. So it is a treatable injury. And so there are lots of things. We do a lot of things through physical therapy for some kids after a concussion. So because there are some things that can be rehabbed. We think a lot about the terms of resting a kid.
That's a good
The previous emphasis has been a lot on we need to rest the brain. We can't let it do anything. We shouldn't be doing any physical activity. And that mentality has shifted, and from research that's been done on concussion. So we do encourage a little bit of light physical activity. So I'll have my patients start doing some brisk walking or some light work on an exercise bike, provided it doesn't worsen their symptoms, and we try and do that earlier on rather than later on like we used to do. And then also remembering that we want to get kids back to school sooner rather than later. But we can do that with adjustments for those kids at school. So it doesn't have to be that they need to be out of school until they feel completely well. I liken it to parents that we've never seen a kid come into our office who got a concussion from doing too much schoolwork. So school will be more challenging, but schools can do a good job of helping those kids out navigating through the school day so they can be in school and help them with their recovery process.
That's good. But so you go to your doctor, you get diagnosed with a concussion. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's the forms of treatment we're gonna follow. That night, do I need to sleep in my kid's room? Do I need to be putting the mirror under their nose? Do I need to watch them?
Right. So
keep all the lights off.
If they've already been observed for a while and things aren't worsening, odds are that kid is going to be fine throughout the night. We actually encourage people, let the children sleep, because actually a good night's sleep is actually really important for everybody. Because your brain needs that good, consistent sleep to recover. If we're getting choppy sleep, we're getting woken up all the time. That's probably not so good. And so the recommendation of waking every couple hours is really something we try and avoid. Now, that may change when we're talking about a younger child who can't necessarily verbally communicate how they're feeling. But I tell everybody, if you try and wake up a teenager in the middle of the night to ask them how they're feeling, that's going to be a struggle in and of itself.
Bad idea.
And we're not seeing kids dying in the middle of the night because of their concussion. So let the kids sleep. Everybody get a good rest, and odds are that will be beneficial to their recovery the next morning.
Anything with screens? Do we need to turn off their phones, turn off their TVs?
We could have a whole session just on screen time in general. Good and bad.
Turn them off.
But in the setting of a concussion, screens by themselves are not inherently bad. They're not going to make your concussion worse, and I think that's one of the things that again, we sometimes treat concussions like punishments. We take away their sports, we take away their electronics. We say you can't do anything. Awesome.
Not only did I pull you out of that game, but you have a super fun evening, sitting on the couch by yourself.
Right, and it's an awesome way to get a kid very depressed and anxious very quickly. And part of that is, kids are socially connected through their electronics, and so we isolate them very quickly. So, we do it within reason, so we do let them use it, but we discourage them from using the screens in darkened rooms, so we don't want them in their bedroom at night. Getting it stopped at a reasonable time before bed, because we do know that actually just screen time use in general before you go to bed can affect your melatonin levels in your body, which then makes you not get to sleep at a good time or a good sound sleep. So the hour before you're in bed, electronics should be gone. Not having it in their room so that it doesn't distract them from sleep at night. So, but we can actually use screens to our advantage in concussions too that people don't think about. So, kids sometimes struggle with reading small print. So electronic device, I can make the print bigger.
Yeah.
I joke putting it on grandma and grandpa size font, and to make it more legible
Yeah.
for them, so it's not as much of a strain on their eyes. So we can use the electronic devices to our advantage too. So they're not all bad.
That's super helpful. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Dr. Halstead.
Sure,
This has
my
been
pleasure.
awesome. Again, we're going to be talking about sports-related injuries and prevention and just ways we can help our young athletes for the next 4 or 5 weeks. So we'll see you again next Friday at 11 o'clock. Looking forward to it then. Thanks so much.